Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus. So there's been a lot of opportunities this week. There's some opportunities I took and some I didn't take at all because of the market structure. So let's go real quick and look at the trade recap. So we'll look at the trades I had from last week. Alright guys, so let's look at the S&P 500. And if you remember from this position, I had this sales from last week. So I was looking at the sales on the S&P 500 from an area like this. So let's zoom in. So this was like a pretty easy structure right here. There was a move to this upside, and if you look at what price had been doing previously, it was an impulse, then a correction. So we had an impulse, and I was looking at this area for a correction, like this hesitation around this area. So I had the sales off of this area right here. Now if you look at the management on this, I didn't manage this properly because once we had the sales, price took off to the downside. So you could see price moving progressively to the downside, pulling back and moving to the downside. So I closed this at, let's say, plus 4.5% around an area like this. I closed the trade around this area. And if you look at it, the management wasn't the best because price actually kept moving to the downside. And that's because I was looking at something else on the DXY that threw me off a little bit. But if you look at this, the management on this will have been a little bit better. So just looking at how price is moving to the downside, it's an impulse, it's a correction, and there was an impulse, there was a correction. So I got a little bit confused around an area like this, and I closed this prematurely. So let's look at this. Yeah, I closed this at plus 4.5%. So that was the first trade on the S&P 500. So I was holding this from last week, by the way. And if you look at this other one, so I had a buy attempt here. I did try the buys from an area like this, and again, it's just the same structure thing. It's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction. So I was looking for buys off of this area and to take prices again to the upside. So this didn't play out properly. So if you look at it, I had a -1 on this position. So the first sell position was okay, that was plus 4.5%. And then the second one, the buys, it didn't go as planned. So that was a -1 right there. So I had another position on gold. So let's look at the position on gold. And I said this last week as well, because I had this trade on the 16th of May. So you look at the buys on this. So same structure thing. From a higher time frame was an impulse, and price just came back to the downside. And I was looking for buys to take prices again to the upside. So let's look at the management on this. So this is still playing out. Like currently, this is playing out. So we have the buys off of this area. And currently, price is sat around an area, I think, like this. So we've had a pretty good movement to the upside, but I'm still watching this, and I had a scaling on this one. So if you look at this, I think I mentioned it somewhere. So right here, so I had a scaling on this buy position. So I don't scale in all the time, but when I do, I always take time, make sure it's aligning with the overall structure and everything. So I have a scaling right here. So I have two buy positions on gold, and it's the same principle. Higher time frame is an impulse, price comes back down, it's a correction. You're looking at this as an impulse, price comes down, it's a correction. You look for the confirmation entries or the things that can align in your favor, and then you take the buys off of those areas. So that's it for the market recap. So I'm still holding my positions on gold, and I will see how price plays are coming into next week, and we'll see if I have to hold it longer or I'll be closing it. So that's it for the trade recap, guys, and let's go dive straight in and look at the other pairs. Alright guys, let's start with the DXY. So here's a couple of things you can see from the DXY, and here's the weekly time frame. So the highest time frame we'll use this week. So for the multi-time frame analysis, I'll use the weekly time frame, then boil down to lower time frames, so like the 4 hours. Now if you look at this, movement on the DXY with price coming to the downside, you probably understand why my position, the one I had on gold, so I'm still holding the buys on gold, and if you look at it, it's because of this movement to the downside. And if you look at the buys I had on the S&P 500, you understand why those buys did not play out properly, because the indices on the DXY is still positively correlated right now. So as the DXY is dropping, those pairs are also dropping likely to the downside, and that's why this buys here didn't really play out, and that's the reason why I'm still holding the buys on gold. So let's look at the DXY from the weekly time frame and try to make sense of this, and I'll zoom out just so we can see what's happening from a bigger point of view. And yeah, let's look at this. So what's the overall structure on this time frame? And we have the trend lines and we have the psychological levels we're looking at. So going off of trend lines, for example, going off of trend lines, you have a lower trend line right here and you have an upper trend line right here. So what this tells you is just points where buyers and sellers are reacting from. You have sellers coming in and you have buyers coming in. So that's a bigger structure thing. And when you look at it this way, it gives you, let's say, some confidence. It gives you, let's say, a peace of mind thing. So you're looking at prices, you're not too nervous, you're not too worried, and it makes it easy for you to anticipate like the bigger moves and just look at higher time frames and then boil down to lower time frames and know what you're doing. So looking at this on the weekly time frame, we have this channel thing, prices moving to the upside, and we're bouncing off of these areas. But what this can tell you, it tells you a couple of things. So once we zoom into an area like this, so let's zoom into this recent price action, because we've seen how price is moving already. So it's an impulse correction, and that's the basis of everything I do. I'm always looking for the impulse, I wait for the correction, and I look for confirmations, then I get the buys again. Same thing, price pulls back to the downside, it's a correction and everything, you're looking for confirmations. Once you get the confirmation, you're looking for the buys. If price pulls back to the downside, price pulls back to the downside, let's see, right here, price pulls back to the downside, we'll do the same thing. We're looking for those confirmations and we're looking for entries just so we can take prices again to the upside. So if you're going off of structure, and it's something I like talking about, let's say the market flow, and market flow is just you looking at how price is flowing, like it's a free flow thing. So how price is moving, it's not something that's difficult, you can do it easily. So how is price moving? It's making higher highs and higher lows, it's effortless, so just going up and down. So that's what I'm looking on the weekly time frame. So once you establish this on the weekly time frame, which is what I've done already, let's look at the current price action. So we're looking at this piece right here, we have the same thing. It's been an impulsive move to the upside and price has come back to the downside. So we've had this correction right here to the downside. So at this point, this is something I call the pivot point, and I think I've explained this in previous videos as well. So that's a pivot point thing right there. So once price took off from this area, you're looking at these areas as pivot points. So if price pulls back to this area, then I'm expecting buys again off of these areas to take prices to the upside. And here's my primary take on this. And if this doesn't happen, then I know we'll sell into the downside on the DXY. But currently, looking at it from the weekly time frame, and I think you can look at this on the monthly as well, and 3 months and maybe the 12-month time frame, you'll see a similar structure, which is price moving to the upside. The 12-month time frame might be a little bit different because this might be a pullback for a bigger move on the 12-month time frame. But let's say the weekly and the monthly is the same thing. It's an impulse, it's a correction, you're waiting for price to come back to your pivot point, and you're looking for buys again to the upside. So looking at this on the weekly time frame, we have a same move right here. So you had this piece right here, price came to the downside straight into the pivot point, and we're looking at the same thing, price is coming again to the downside straight into the pivot point. So all we have to do is wait and see how price is reacting around an area like this. If we see difficulties for prices to go to the downside, if you see like slowing down from the sellers, if you see, let's say, reversals around this area, then you're looking for those confirmation entries just so you can take prices again to the upside. So that's my bias right there on the weekly time frame. Now once we step down to lower time frames, let's say the hourly time frame, the daily time frame, we're paying attention to this piece right here as price is coming to the downside. I'll step down to the daily time frame and see the structures price is giving me and the psychological levels again we're looking at. So looking at it on the weekly time frame, we're still looking at this psychological level of here's 110, and here's 100 flat. So price is playing between these two levels right here. So it's bouncing off of this area, and we're looking at this piece right here, and prices hovering around this area. So an inability for prices to go through this area, then we're expecting prices to move to the upside. So going off of psychological levels, it's one level to the next. An inability for price to go through 100, we're expecting prices to go to the upside, and the next is 110. So still on the weekly time frame, if everything stays the same, if this trend line stays intact and it doesn't get violated, we're still expecting prices to move to the upside. If this point of interest stays intact without getting violated, we're still expecting prices or buyers to react from this area and take prices to the upside. So with this piece of information out, you can now step down to the daily time frame and just see how price is moving to the downside. So on the daily time frame, this is what I'm looking at right here, just market structure. Price is making lower lows and lower highs. So price is making lower lows and lower highs. Now the question is, if the DXY has to reverse to the upside, then at some point there needs to be an inability for the DXY to move to the downside. So at some point you should expect the DXY to find it difficult to move to the downside. So it's gonna slow down, then you see the reversal and everything. Now my reversal pattern might be different from yours. You might be looking at something completely different for the reversals, and I'm looking at something completely different, but at the same time we're all waiting for that inability, that struggle for price to move to the downside so you can take prices again to the upside. So that's what I'm looking on the DXY on the daily time frame. And you can step down to lower time frames. You can go, let's say, to the 8-hour time frame. You can look at the 4-hour time frame. It's the same thing. It's not going to change a lot. So let's see. Let's look at the 8-hour time frame. So as you start moving to lower time frames, you have more price action to look at, and how you can look at this in a very simple way. Every time you have an impulse, there's a correction, price breaks, giving you another impulsive move to the downside. There's a correction, price breaks, giving you an impulsive move to the downside. So looking at this on the DXY, so while you have an impulsive move, price is taking out the lows. You have an impulsive move, price takes out these lows. So we had an impulsive move right here, and price created this low right here. So if you're going off of the structure thing, it's an impulse, correction, impulse. So it's an impulse, it's a correction. So we had another correction right here, and price took this off, and we was reacting from these areas right here. So you're looking at this trend line thing again, just how price is reacting from trend lines. And you don't have to believe in trend lines if you don't use trend lines, but trend lines is like the basics. So I have trend lines, I have psychological levels. Those are the two things I use. So you might not believe in this thing, but I believe in it because I've spent lots of time looking at it, and it's just a while look at prices. So if price has been reacting from these areas and moving to the downside, it's an impulse correction thing, and you're anticipating the price is going to move again to the downside. So looking at this on the daily time frame, I still think, going over what's happening, the DXY should drop to this area right here. So we should expect prices to drop to the downside. And if price has to move to the downside, I'm looking at these lows right here. There's a trend line coming from the daily time frame. So you're looking at this piece. It's a very vital area. If price can drop to this area, it's going to give us lots of movement on those other pairs. Now you can already look at this and start anticipating what price is going to do on, let's say, GBPUSD, Euro USD, let's say AUD USD, NZD USD. So the pairs which are negatively correlated to the DXY. Just looking at this from the weekly, daily, and then the 8-hour time frame. And if the DXY has to keep moving to the downside, you can look for buying opportunities on those other pairs, and gold as well, because it's still negatively correlated as of now. So that's my analysis right there on the DXY, and let's see if we can spot the same thing on the 4-hour time frame. All right, perfect. So this is what I was looking on the 4-hour time frame last week. So the flow on the 4-hour time frame last week, we had this flow right here. So I was expecting prices to react from this area right here. We get another push to the upside. And if price breaks out of this area, you get a test, you see an impulse to the upside, or you see price moving to the downside. So It didn't happen as I was planning for it to happen. So let's look at this right here. So we was able to look at this, like this was a good move. It was an impulse correction. It was an impulse playing off of this area on the daily time frame. So the seller stepped in again, and this is a move coming in from the daily time frame. So it takes away what you're looking at on the 4-hour time frame. So in as much as we had the buys again off of this area, it wasn't able to sustain this pressure coming in from the sellers. So there's a couple of things I'm looking at on the DXY on the 4-hour time frame. So again, I'm paying attention to the psychological level right here. That's 100. So if you look at the play thing, you had price coming to the downside. You had this piece right here. You had an impulse, you had a correction, you had another impulse thing, and price pulled back to this area. So not just the price pull back to this area, but you're looking at this area, there's a psychological level, there's a trend line that got violated. So looking at it, so once I saw this, I think during the week thing, once I saw price breaking out of this trend line, this piece right here, price breaking out of this trend line, coming back to test the trend line, test the psychological level, it gave me confidence that price is going to move again to the downside. So it just increased my confidence with the positions I had on gold, and even taking the scalings on gold, because I could see this happening. And looking at this, I know if price has to move to the downside, then we're looking at this lows right here on the 4-hour time frame. On the daily time frame is the same thing. We're expecting prices to move to the downside, testing this lows, and in ability for prices to go through this area, then we could expect prices to get the reversal again to the upside. So coming into next week, I think we should be watching out for the movement again to the downside on the DXY. And there's a couple of ways you can look at it. First, just put your trend line thing. It's going to tell you where price is bouncing off of, and there's a trend line shift. So if price is not playing off of this, then you're looking at the next piece right here, and it's the same thing. It's an impulse, it's a correction, impulse, correction. So you could expect prices to come back to an area like this, then move again to the downside. So that's my analysis right there on the DXY, and let's see if we can use this analysis on the DXY and make sense of what's happening on other pairs. And again, the DXY just gives you a broader picture of what's happening to the dollar. Now you can use this on other pairs and see if you should hold your positions a little bit longer or close your positions, because price might start reversing. So that's my analysis right there on the DXY. So let's clean this. So we're looking at prices moving again to the downside. So we might get a push, a pullback, we might get something like that. Then you get prices coming to the downside. So right there. So let's keep this fixated on the chart and save this. All right, guys. So that's my analysis on the DXY, and let's look at other pairs. We'll go a little bit quicker on those other pairs as well. Alright guys, so here's US30 on the weekly time frame. So we have an understanding already. The DXY and the indices, they're positively correlated right now. So if you have the DXY selling, you should expect some sales to come in on these indices. Now the extent to which you get the sales, it might be a little bit different on the other indices, but let's start with US30 and see what we're looking at. So on the weekly time frame, so there's a bigger picture thing I'm looking at. So it's an impulse, it's a correction, and price takes off, giving us an impulse. There was a correction here. Now this was a little bit tricky, because if you look at this piece right here, we had, let's say, a violation of this trend line, but at the same time price pulled back to the upside, still trading within this trend line. So to make sense of this, I have to step down to lower time frames as well. Now the psychological levels we're still looking at remains the same. It's 40,000 and 50,000 right there. So if price fails to go through 40,000, we're expecting prices to then move all the way to 50,000. So just going off of psychological levels, that's the analysis based off of psychological levels. Now based off of the trend line thing, I'm looking at this trend line on the weekly time frame. You had a violation, price coming back up. So let's step down to lower time frames and see what we're looking at. So the first one is on the daily time frame. So on the daily time frame, I was able to spot this piece right here. So there's a different structure thing I'm looking at on the daily time frame. So in as much as you've seen the violation on the weekly time frame, I have a good structure I can play with on the daily time frame. So it's an impulse, it's a correction, price takes off from this area, it's an impulse, everything, it's a correction right here, and you see the correction right here, and price takes off again to the upside. So while looking at this, you're expecting prices to move all the way to the upside again and taking out this high. So that's what I've been looking on the daily time frame. But for some reason, if you zoom in on this area, so recent price action, as price starts moving to the upside, let's see if I can show you guys. So if you look at this piece right here, as price reacts from this area, so the pullback comes in, then price takes off to the upside. Price takes up to the upside, giving you higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows, and stuff like this. So looking at this piece right here, I was expecting the same thing to happen. So now this right here is just price telling me you need to pause a little bit. We might be having, let's say, a pullback for prices to move again to the upside. So you look at this piece, it's an impulse, it's a correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, and I was expecting prices to play like this all the way to the upside. So it didn't happen, because if you look at this piece right here, there's a trend line, there's a violation. So what is this violation telling me? And you can step down to lower time frames, and there's a couple of things I'm looking at. First, before we look at, let's say, the 8-hour time frame, if this price has to pull back, so looking at this move right here, it's an impulsive move to the upside, and the same way we've been trading, it's an impulse, correction, impulse. So if this is an impulse right here, we're expecting a correction to come in, and we're expecting prices to move again to the upside. Now the correction might come in deeper, the correction might end around an area like this. So I know there's a correction coming in. How deep is the correction going to go? That's left for prices. So just looking at it, I have an understanding already. So there's a couple of things I can do. The first one is just anticipating that price might be testing this area. So if price has to test this trend line, which is a very simple concept thing, if you have price moving to the upside, higher highs and higher lows, you get a violation. Price likes to get a test of a trend line, just so you can see prices moving again to the downside. So that's something you can use in a situation like this. So we've had price breaking out of this uptrend and price is coming to the downside. So if we wait for the pullback thing, so you can see price pulling back, or you get a correction and price coming to the downside, there's a couple of areas I'm looking at. There's a psychological level right here, 48,000. You have this trend line that got violated for price to move to the upside. So you could see prices coming again to the downside, just so we can test that area. And there's a possibility as well, you can see prices coming back to this trend line from higher time frames. So looking at it, there's lots of possibilities right here on US30. And just so you look at this, and before looking at this on lower time frames, it's very important you understand, if price has to move to the downside, it's not going to drop immediately to the downside. You could see price pulling back to the upside, giving you a pullback, because now you have an impulse, correction. You get an impulse, you get a correction. If it has to go lower, you get an impulse, you get a correction. So there's a couple of things I'm looking at on US30 right now, just trying to understand how far the pullbacks can come in. And it's gonna take some time for me to figure it out, because you need more price action. But just looking at it on the daily time frame, and I'm anticipating already, price might pull back to areas like this, price might pull back to areas like this, and there's a couple of things I'm trying to piece together just to make sense of the pullback. So looking at what's happening on the DXY again, and looking at what's happening on these indices, I'm expecting some sales to come in. So let's look at the 8-hour time frame. So on our time frames, so if you look at the daily time frame, look at this trend line, we're taking out price is already trading outside right there. You look at the 8-hour time frame, same thing, going off of the market flow theory thing. It's been an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, and I was expecting buys off of this area. Now it failed, so we're looking at price moving again to the downside. You could look at this area right here, 48,000. Price might move all the way to 48,000. So those are all possibilities right there. You look at the 4-hour time frame, and it's the same thing. So looking at price coming all the way maybe to like 40,000 right here. So if there's an area I'll be paying attention to, I think it's 40,000 on US30. So that's the first area I want to see price selling to. So I'm just trying to make sense of what's happening, because if you step down, let's say to lower time frames, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse. So let's see what price is doing, and you can put trend lines again on lower time frames, but personally I'll stay on higher time frames for now and make sense of what's happening. Look at the 8-hour time frame. At the same time, I'm looking at the daily to see what's happening. So we might see price doing this impulse correction for another impulsive move to the upside. So that for me right there is my analysis on US30. I just have to be patient. There's no position I can go in right now. Now on lower time frames, let's say on the hourly time frame, you can take the sales and the corrections coming in, but for now I'm just going to sit on my hands and see what price is doing. So that's my analysis right there on US30. So let's look at the next pair. Alright guys, so here's NAS100 on the weekly time frame, and I think compared to US30, I like NAS100 better. So look at this on US30. So let's look at US30 on the weekly time frame, and I will do a comparison with what's happening on NAS100. So you look at US30 on the weekly time frame, we had price moving to the upside, had a violation, price came back inside. So this already is telling you there is some pressure from the buyers and sellers. It might be difficult to see what's happening right here, but when you look at the structure on NAS100 on the weekly time frame, there's enough room for us to play, let's say, to the downside. So going off of the market flow thing, how is price moving? It's an impulse, it's a correction, everything, it's an impulse, it's been a correction as well. So every time you get price pulling back to your pivot point, you're expecting prices to move to the upside. There's a pullback, you're expecting prices to move to the upside, taking out these highs. So I'm still expecting prices to take out these highs on NAS100, and the next psychological level for me will head it all the way to 25,000. So that's the analysis right there on the bigger time frame. That's the analysis on the weekly time frame. So if we clean this and zoom into an area like this, just current price action. So it's been an impulse as well. It's been a correction. So how is price going to take out this area? So we've seen price moving to the upside, and price is currently at this area. It's not moving again to the upside, so we might be having a pullback. So and to see this clearly, you might have to step down to lower time frames, because on the weekly time frame you're probably not seeing structures as getting violated and broken on the weekly time frame. So the overall picture thing, we're still expecting prices to move all the way to 25,000, so making new highs all the way to 25,000. Reason being, we're playing off of this piece right here, which is a pivot point, and it's the same thing with this piece right here. So you had a pivot point all the way to the downside. So with this understanding, we can look at, let's say that's the weekly, we can look at the daily. So same thing with what's happening on US30. The trend line on the daily time frame is broken already. So you're looking at the market flow thing. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction. So normally you should have been expecting buys off of this area. And so what happens? Price breaks out of this area. So now we're trading outside this trend line on the daily time frame. So this already tells you there's a problem with this movement to the upside. So price is not going to break out for no reason. It's telling you we should expect some pullbacks to come in, but it doesn't mean price is reversing to go, let's say, to take out areas on the monthly time frame. So we're playing off of different time frames. So we're still on the daily time frame, and let's look at the 8-hour time frame, because I was looking at a different structure thing on the 8-hour time frame. So on the 8-hour time frame, the flow is the same thing. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse. You're waiting for buys, and price takes off. So normally you should be waiting for buys off of these areas, buys and buys. So you should be waiting for buys off of this area, and if you did take the buys off of this area, it failed, and that's completely fine. So now what price is doing, it's just telling you might be moving to the downside. And once I look at what's happening on the DXY, it just gives me like there's more interest in these other pairs, because this might start moving to the downside as well. I'll look at the daily time frame again and see. So there's a couple of areas I can pay attention to, and the first one and the best one for me, it's always the psychological level. So looking at the psychological level of 20,000, this could be an area where price pulls back to. That's one level. Now if you look at this piece right here, so we've taken out this area, price was making lower lows and lower highs, then you get a push to the upside. So price could pull back even deeper, so price can pull back even deeper, just so we could test this trend line thing. So we could see price coming in a little bit deeper, and another area we could see price coming back to is an area like this. So there's a couple of areas we're looking at on NAS100. So we could expect sales to come in again on this pairs. So how deep this is going to go, like, I really cannot tell. So we might see price just coming back to like 20,000 and price stops moving to the downside. Then you get a reversal to the upside. Then you might get a deeper pullback coming back to this trend line thing right here. So those are all possibilities right there. So all I have to do right now is just pay attention to the price action and see what price is doing on lower time frames as well. So here's on the daily. So let's look at this on the 8-hour time frame. So it's the same thing on the 8-hour time frame. We've taken out this piece right here. So you look at the flow thing, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse, and now price is trading outside. So once you look at this on lower time frames, it's going to give you an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction. First point of interest, the psychological level of 20,000. So let's see if price can get to 20,000, and if price starts moving to the downside all the way to 20,000, I'll look at the structure price is giving us. If it starts giving higher highs, higher lows, lower lows and lower highs, then I'll look for a possibility to get sales again, because at that point I understand what price is trying to do. So right now is a little bit too early, and the reason I'd say it's a little bit too early is because this might be looking as a violation of a trend line on all those beautiful things. But once the market opens, you could see price coming back, you get a test, and price starts moving again to the upside. So this is going to keep every other person like really surprised, like, cool, we thought price was moving to the downside, but now it's moving again to the upside. So I always say there's two sides to the coin. In as much as I have this bias for prices to go to the downside for sales, if we come back and price starts moving to the upside, we'll get a pullback thing. Same thing, impulse correction, and this might have been a fake out thing, or however you want to call it. Impulse again, correction, and I'm looking for the buy. So those are all possibilities I'm looking at right there. But currently on NAS100, I'm looking for sales to the downside. All right, guys, so that's my analysis right there on NAS100. So let's see, the 4-hour time frame is similar to the 8-hour time frame. Personally, I think I'll look at this on the daily. Yeah, I'll probably stay between the daily time frame and the 8-hour time frame just to see what's happening perfectly. So that's my analysis right there on NAS100. Let's look at the next pair. All right, guys, so here's the S&P 500 on the weekly time frame, and I like the S&P 500 and just the structure this price is giving you. And when you look at the levels, it looks really good. So I think the S&P 500 and NAS100, this looks really good. So the bigger picture thing, so let's see, it's an impulse correction, everything to the upside impulse. Yeah, we had a correction, price moving to an area like this, and we're expecting prices to go to the upside, taking out these highs. But currently price seems not to be moving to the upside. So let's zoom in and see what's happening around an area like this. Perfect. So we have an impulse, you have a correction, and price is moving to the upside. Now for some reason, once we got to this area right here, this psychological level of 60,000, so price hasn't gone through 60,000 impulsively. Price came back to 50,000 right here. There was a rejection around 50,000, and this is why I like using the psychological levels, because once you have the major psychological levels, you can see how price is interacting between these two levels. So we had price moving all the way to 60, and inability for prices to go through 60, we had price coming back to the downside. Now put this with the overall picture thing, an inability for prices to go through 6,000, sorry, it's 6,000 not 60. An inability for prices to go through 6,000, we had to pull back all the way to 5,000. When you look at the bigger picture thing, it's simply an impulsive move to the upside and a correction to the downside, and an inability to go through 5,000. We're expecting prices to test again 6,000. I keep talking about 60. So we're expecting prices to get back to 6,000. So let's look at this as price is moving to the upside. This is on the weekly time frame, but what's the daily time frame telling us? What's the 8-hour time frame telling us? Because if we have structures or if we have levels or trend lines that's getting violated already, then it's probably telling us we might see prices pulling back just a little bit deeper. We might see prices pulling back maybe to areas like this. Then you get prices moving again to the upside and even going above this piece right here. So that's something I'm looking on the S&P 500. So that's the analysis on the weekly time frame. And let's clean this and step down to the daily time frame. Perfect. So I'll take out this piece right here. You know what, let's keep that. Now let's take it out. Perfect. So let's step back to the weekly. Perfect. So I want to see this on the daily time frame because yep. So let's look at this on the daily time frame. Perfect. So on the daily time frame, here's what I'm looking at. So as price is moving to, let's put this right here. Perfect. So as price is moving to the upside, we're looking at the structure price is giving us. It's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction. So around an area like this on lower time frame, normally I'll be looking for buys off of those areas, and that's why I had the loss on the S&P 500, because I was looking for buys off of this area to take prices again to the upside. And all I was doing is waiting for the confirmation, which I actually saw. So I had price impulse correction back to the pivot point thing, entry confirmations. I saw the confirmation, then I took the buys and it didn't play out. So once I took a loss on this, I had to step back and look at higher time frames, and I started looking at the weekly time frame just to understand what price is doing. So it was an impulse thing, it was a correction. Price came in very close to 6,000. We didn't really test 6,000. So going off of this, there's a possibility we might see price pulling back and we get a test of 6,000 and we see price going above 6,000. So as I start moving to lower time frames, let's say the daily, the first thing I had to see after taking the loss was this violation right here. I was like, cool, so let's see what the 8-hour time frame is telling me. Let's look at this piece on the 8-hour time frame. So it's a similar thing with what's happening on the daily. So if I put this on the 8-hour time frame, perfect, right here, step back to the 8-hour time frame. So you look at this piece on the 8-hour time frame, you have the same thing. It's an impulse, correction, impulse, correction, impulse, correction, and price starts moving to the downside. So looking at this on, let's say, higher time frames, if price has to pull back, let's say really deep pullback, we could see price taking this area out. So you could see price coming back to the downside to test this trend line thing. You could see prices pulling back to like 5,000. That's going to be like a really deep pullback, and there's a possibility a price can do it because I've seen pullbacks coming in like really deep, almost 100% pullback, and price takes off again to the upside. So I've seen really deep pullbacks coming in and price takes off again to the upside. So those are all possibilities right there. And let's look at this again from the weekly time frame. So looking at this from the weekly time frame, now if price doesn't drop all the way to 5,000, let's say we get an extension of this. So let's extend this piece right here. So there's a possibility as well price can just come back to this area. So we're looking at this piece right here, and it might take a week or two for prices to drop to an area like this. That's only if price has to drop to this area. So we might see prices coming back to an area like this, and we take prices to the upside. So that's a possibility right there on the S&P 500. But at the same time, we have to look at lower time frames. So we have a violation already on the daily time frame. So this violation might lead us to, come back. Yeah. So the violation on the daily time frame might lead us to this trend line thing, to an area like this. So that's something I'm looking at. So we might see price pulling back to an area like this, and we see prices moving again to the upside. So if there's an area I need to pay attention to, first you have this trend line, you have this other trend line. So price might start testing these areas, And if it comes to the downside, we're looking for those confirmations around an area like this. It's a pivot point again, so we're looking for prices to move again to the upside. So let's see the 8-hour time frame. Sorry about that, guys. So let's look at the 4-hour time frame. So all right, cool. So here's the 4-hour time frame on the S&P 500, and this is really interesting because if you look at the move right here, it's been an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse, waiting for prices to react off of this area so we can take prices to the upside. So we had this fail right here, so pricing moves to the upside, so I'm expecting prices right now to move to the downside on the S&P 500. So if you look at this on lower time frames, you can see price giving you lower lows. So it's an impulse right here, it's a correction, it's an impulse, and we could wait for corrections maybe to this area. You could wait for correction to an area like this, so you get another impulse. Or you could see on the lower time frame again the trend line shift, and price is giving you already impulse correction, and price is playing off of this area, so we can get another impulsive move to the downside. So yeah, that's what I'm looking on the S&P 500, and I think it's really similar to what we're looking at on NAS100. So that's my analysis right there. You start moving back to higher time frames, trend line is taken out. You move, let's say, to the daily, trend line is taken out. Where can price gravitate to? We're looking at this area right here, this piece right here. Price took out this area, so there's a lot of reasons why price can come to the downside. And if you combine this with the DXY, if the DXY drops again impulsively, I'll be looking at this indices just so we can see price moving to the downside. And if it keeps giving us this impulse correction, with this trend lines being violated on lower time frames, then we could be looking at a trend line delivery to like the weekly time frame. All right, guys, so that's my analysis right there on the S&P 500, and let's look at the beautiful pair, like the most talked about one. Alright guys, so here's gold on the weekly time frame, and here's a beautiful one, because when you look at how this pair is moving, it's really fascinating. Sometimes it respects structure, sometimes like it's a magnet thing. So on the bigger time frame, on the weekly time frame, it's an impulse, it's a correction, you're waiting for the pivot point so price can move again to the upside. So to be honest, once price got to this area, I was expecting sales off of those areas right there. So if you look at this, sellers and sellers, so I was expecting prices to sell. But once we didn't get the sales off of this area, and looking at the psychological level right here, of 3,000, once we didn't get the sales off of this area, so I had to start looking at the buys again to the upside, because a trend line is going to get violated at some point. You get a violation test and a continuation in the direction the violation occurred. So looking at this on the weekly time frame, I was expecting sales off of this area. It didn't happen. We had a bridge to the upside, so price starts moving again to the upside. All right, cool. So that's on the weekly time frame. So if the DXY keeps moving to the downside, we're expecting this pair to keep moving to the upside. Now we're playing off of 3,000. If price has to keep moving to the upside, we're looking at this psychological level of 4,000. Yeah, so we're expecting prices to give us like the pullback thing, which price has done already, pulled back to an area like this. So we're expecting prices to keep moving to the upside. So that's what I'm looking on the weekly time frame. So if you step down to the daily real quick, so there's a trend line shift on the daily time frame, and that's what I'm looking at. So remember, on the weekly time frame we had the bigger picture thing. Now on the daily time frame, we're looking at this piece right here. It's an impulse correction within the overall picture. It's an impulse, it's a correction. If you take out everything, it's an impulse and it's a correction. You're looking for your pivot point, you get a confirmations, and you take prices to the upside. Perfect. So right now, as price is moving to the upside, we can zoom in again to the current price action thing and look at what price is doing. So there's a trend line shift again right here to the upside. So you have an impulse correction, we had a bigger move right here, and we had a bigger pullback to the downside. So if you look at the buys I had my buys within this area. So on lower time frames, I had the entry confirmation taking prices to the upside, and my intention again is to take out these highs and see if prices can make its way all the way to 4,000. Now The immediate area I'm paying attention to is not the psychological level, but the highs around an area like this. So I'm expecting prices to move to that area. So now look at the DXY again one more time. If the DXY has to move to the downside, so if it gets a pullback, pull back and move. So let's say, so let's say the DXY has to move to the downside. So I'll be looking at gold and I'll probably hold my buy positions a little bit longer. Now you need to understand as well, you might face difficulties as this pair is moving to the downside, as this pair is moving to the upside, because if the DXY has a reversal, then you might see this same thing on this pair and you see price moving to the downside. So in as much as I have the buys on gold, I took the buys off of an area like this. On lower time frame it was really lower. So in as much as I have the buys on this pair, I'm also very cautious. I'm really careful just looking at it, because there's a lot that can happen on the DXY and it can cause reversals on this pair. So here's on the daily time frame, and let's look at, let's say, the 8-hour time frame. So what am I looking on the 8-hour time frame? It's the same structure of what's happening on the daily time frame. So same thing I've been looking at, impulse, and I study my corrections or the pullbacks, then I look for buying opportunities. Now you have an impulse, the pullback was a deeper one. It's still the same thing, you're looking for buying opportunities. So same thing, it's an impulse. Now you can look at everything as a range thing. There's a manipulation within the range, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it as an impulse and everything coming to the downside. There's a correction, same thing, waiting for entry confirmations, looking for the buys off of those areas, and again just taking prices to the upside so we can take this out. So I think it's the same structure of what we're looking on the daily time frame. Now on this pair, I think I had a scaling on this pair, so we'll look at this again, and let's look at the 4-hour time frame right here. All right, perfect. So on the 4-hour time frame, here's what I was looking at for my scaling. So I have a scaling on this pair, and I'll show you guys what I'm looking at currently, and maybe on the hourly time frame you see it better. So you have an impulse, you have a correction. So the market flow thing, again, it's price just moving to the upside. So I'm waiting for, let's say, deeper pullbacks again and for price to move to the upside. Now if price comes back to an area like this and there's an inability for prices to move to the upside, just like what you've been seeing on US30, NAS and the S&P, because once you get a break of these trend lines, you should expect prices to start moving to the downside. So that's something I'm paying attention to, because there's a possibility we might get a reversal. Because looking at the DXY thing, you might see the DXY pulling back because there's a trend line we're working with. There's an area we're paying attention to. So you might see the DXY pulling back to that area for it to move again to the downside. So this already can cause pullbacks on pairs like gold on lower time frames for us to look for entries again to the upside, or for us to manage the position better on this lower time frame. So here's what we're looking at on the 4-hour time frame. So coming into next week, there's a couple of things you can do. So let's see if there's any structure on the 8-hour time frame you can pay attention to. Now look at this. So we had a pullback thing to the upside, and as price came down, you had this, you had buyers, you had sellers, and you've had buyers. So there's a possibility as well, you might see sellers coming off of an area like this. So there's a high possibility. So while looking at this, on what time frame is this? On the 8-hour time frame, it's very interesting right now, because we might see sellers coming in to the downside. So the only way you can tell, or the easiest way for you to tell, is to look at a trend line that's coming into the upside. Once we get a violation of this trend line and a test, that's it. So you need to see sellers coming in again. So that's something I'll be paying attention to on gold, because if you get a violation thing, then you're expecting sellers to step in. So that's something I'll be paying attention to on gold. You can look at this now on the 4-hour time frame, and because you have this understanding as to what price is trying to do on higher time frames, and you're looking at this piece right here, you could expect sellers to come in from an area like this. But at the same time, if we get a pullback and there's an inability for these sellers to really take prices to the downside, you get a break, you're waiting for this, you might see prices moving again to the upside. So those are the things I'm paying attention to. And let's look at this on the hourly. So I'll show you this on the hourly. Perfect. So the hourly time frame for me is where I look for my entries. So looking at this on the hourly time frame, we shouldn't be doing the analysis on the hourly, but you can look at the flow thing. It's impulse, correction, and you can see the reason why. So I had the buys off of this area, price pulled back. There was an entry right here, I missed this, but price came back to an area like this, and I had a scaling around this area. So how is price moving right now? Impulse, correction. So you have buyers and sellers fighting from both directions. So depending on what the DXY tries to do, so I'll be looking at this pair, and at the same time I'll be looking at the DXY. The understanding again, the DXY could trade to an area like this. If this happens, then I'll hold these positions on gold, because we could see a pullback thing and we'll see price moving again to the upside. Now if this doesn't happen, and coming into next week the DXY pulls back impulsively, or there's an inability for the DXY to move to the downside, you get a reversal and you see the DXY moving to the upside, then you come back, look at this pair. Now you step back to higher time frames, 4-hour time frame, you get a push, inability, and you see prices coming to the downside. So that's my analysis right there for gold and the other pairs. So I'll just be a little bit patient and see what's happening next week, hold the positions I can hold. If I see the reversals coming in like crazy, I'll have to close some of those positions. But if everything stays the same, if the DXY keeps moving to the downside, I'll hold this position a little bit longer to see if we can take out those highs. But it's a little bit tricky right now, so I'll pay attention to everything that's happening. But that's the analysis right there for me, guys, and hopefully we get some good opportunities next week. All right, guys, stay patient, stay consistent with everything you do, and I'll see you during the next one. Bye for now.